Welcome to Sex Ed with DB. I'm your host, DB. Let's get into it. Valentine's Day doesn't have to suck if you're single. In fact, you can be the main event. I'm DB from Sex Ed with DB, teaming up with Talia from Dating Intentionally for a 4-day all-inclusive retreat in Palm Springs, California, from February 12th to 15th, 2026. This is just for single women and femmes, and there are only 12 spots. Think: heated pool, hot tub, pickleball, all your meals included with a private chef, yoga, cocktails and mocktails, and juicy workshops to help you get crystal clear on your dating life, values, and pleasure. The waitlist is open right now. Go to our link in our link in bio or linktr.ee/sexedwithdb to sign up right now. Hi cuties, DB here with another Best Of episode. This time we're pulling together clips on one of our most popular topics. Y'all are freaks. I support it. Masturbation. Masturbation is so personal, but there are plenty of tips and tricks and solutions that can apply to everyone. The pendulum swings back and forth with the stigma around masturbation, and it can be one of the hardest things to ask about, but hopefully you find some answers here in this Best Of episode. And always remember, there is no shame in having questions or curiosities about your sexual education and your wellness, and that includes masturbation. So in this episode, you will hear clips from our episode with the Dr. Eric Sprankle, a solo episode where I tackle the question of how much masturbation is too much masturbation, and our amazing episode with Vic Liu. And as always, with our best ofs, you can find more context and information in those full episodes. So those are going to be linked for you in the show notes for easy access. Enjoy these steamy clips all about the pleasure and science of masturbation. Back to this idea, I want to talk about like tools and toys and like the joy of masturbating, and how kind of like tools and toys have maybe changed over time and what that landscape looked like.
Yeah. So this kind of came into the humans landscape at least 30,000 years ago, possibly. A penis-shaped tool sharpener was found in a cave in Germany during an excavation that was that old. And it's debatable whether the device was specifically used for any type of, sexual gratification. It was definitely used for some type of tool sharpening, given kind of the cuts on it. But tool sharpener doesn't have to look like a penis. So then there's debate of like, was this figurative art? Was it used in rituals, or was it,
a dildo?
Early dildo? Right, exactly. Because dildos have been pictured in art for thousands of years. And so probably somebody was forming it out of like siltstone or like clay or something. So that's always kind of been present for almost as long as Homo sapiens have existed. But the big game changer was the invention of the vibrator. And common myth is that the vibrator was specifically invented to cure like women's quote unquote hysteria of the time in the late 1800s. It was not. That's just a myth. And in fact, it was invented specifically just for men. The inventor didn't want anything to do with like women's health. He thought maybe the percussion was going to be like too much for dainty Victorian era women or something. I don't know. Obviously, a lot of sexism within medicine. But yeah, it was invented for men for a whole host of physical complaints, and it was estimated to be used sexually, the vibrator, early 20th century. So, if then it was invented for like this percussive kind of medical treatment in the late 1890s, and then starting to be used in the early 1900s. That's what the historian Dr. Kate Lister refers to as a kink blink. And I love that term. And that's the time from when something is invented to when that invention starts to be used sexually. And it's usually very quick, known as a kink blink, right? So with the invention of the vibrator, yes, it wasn't invented for sexual purposes, but it was probably used for sexual purposes very, very quickly. And the vibrator itself has an interesting history. And there's another researcher at the university I go to, Dr. Dennis Waskell. He's a sociologist. He wrote a paper on kind of categorizing this timeline from the late 1800s when vibrators were first invented, that it was originally sold as like a medical device, that it's going to treat all sorts of ailments, right? And when the AMA kind of released a statement, be like, no, it doesn't. And then the vibrator started like falling out of favor as a medical device, and then started just being sold as a household appliance. And then starting in the 1960s and 70s, the vibrator was starting to be used or viewed as a tool for liberation. And so a lot of like feminist-owned sex shops started popping up in San Francisco and New York originally, and viewing those spaces as like collective liberation, and how masturbation, led a lot by Betty Dotson, how collective liberation can come from understanding one's own sexuality and expressing oneself through masturbation, and the liberation effects from using a vibrator for masturbation. And then unfortunately, it's kind of gone away from a tool for liberation and is now viewed as kind of more of a consumer toy for self-care. And it's like, oh, I can get this through Amazon Prime and it'll be here by 10 p.m. for some me time tonight, right? It's very kind of packaged in that way, very individualized health, as opposed to like collective liberation.
I think what I'm wondering is, do you think that there are downsides to it more being like an individualistic thing? Like, is there more kind of like shame and kind of like repression with it more being like Amazon Prime kind of like, you can be quiet about this, rather than us like talking about it in a collective? Or do you know what I mean?
Yeah. What I was seeing is that it's not necessarily tied to shame, but just more of kind of like a cultural shift of like, who's responsible for healthcare, right? And the well-being of a society. We moved away from public health, and it's more like an individual, right? That you're responsible for your own health. So here's some wellness tips that you can do during your lunch break, and you're going to be all set to get back to work, right? It's less about like collective organizing for better wages and better healthcare. It's more about what you can do as an individual. And I think, our relationship with masturbation, and especially the commercial aspects of it with like buying sex toys, has just kind of followed that trend, that it's more about individualized wellness, more so than kind of the secrecy of the individualized nature of it, and more of just like, no, that's my responsibility. If I want to feel better, it's on me. It's not, I don't have to worry about what other people are doing. There's collective action. It's all on me. And, you know, I ended the book and my conclusion kind of addressing this a little bit more, because as I was writing it, I realized like it was making this shift, and we kind of lost that spirit of the 1960s and 70s with collective liberation, and that to liberate masturbation also means to liberate a lot of other things related to sexuality. And we've kind of turned that into like almost a consumer product of just individualized wellness and self-care. And we package it and get HR directives of what to do on our breaks and everything, make sure we're standing and sitting enough. And so I get a little cynical of how masturbation is talked about in those circles of like it's self-care, but also not dismissing it completely, because it's what we have, right? An individual can't change the system in which we're living in, so we do have to cope with the system that we're living in. And if the best way that we can cope in a particular moment is to make that purchase for a dildo or a vibrator to arrive by 10 p.m. tonight for some alone me time in the bathtub, then great, have at it. Right. Yeah. That's not a bad thing on the individual level, right? We can critique it on like, is this doing anything collectively for a movement? Right. And we can argue not much. But on the individual level, yeah, it's perfectly fine and understandable where this is coming from, and necessary, quote, me time.
Yeah, that's kind of why I want to bring back like sex toy, like Tupperware like parties, because I feel like, you know, like young women in particular, and young queer people, like 18, 19, 20-year-olds in college, right? Like they, in America at least, most likely got like pretty shit sex ed. And if they got good sex ed, they were very lucky, and that's not the norm. And then they go to college where there's typically, a lot of kind of like openness. They're experimenting. They're having sex for the first time in some cases. And that, I think, is the perfect opportunity to kind of bring back these old kind of like sex toy parties to really like engage with folks individually, but also on this collective level where people aren't only learning about sexuality and sexual health on the internet, which is how typically young folks specifically are learning on their TikTok or their Instagram, but they're like actually engaging in like an open dialogue in person around sex toys, masturbation, pleasure. And I think there's like a huge gap there that I wonder like how to reach those people other than kind of like pitching, sororities or like individual kind of groups where like a lot of these women in particular are. Like, do you have any, is it kind of like buy my book, like, like do a book club? Is that kind of like part of that, or what do you see that gap as?
No, not my book. And I shouldn't be saying don't buy my book. But no, for that reason, no, don't buy my book. It's not self-help. It's not prescriptive. Right. And as you were talking about that, I was thinking like, yeah, there is definitely a need of a lot of that spirit that came out of the 60s and 70s and some of these very sex positive spaces that were very educational, very transformative. That, some of them still exist. We have one here in Minneapolis. That's great. That does that. And if they put on events and things like that, but even just a regular consumer by themselves walking in, they're going to be, greeted by sex educators that can really, that they know the business of masturbation and the pleasure of masturbation, that they can walk that customer through the various types of vibrators and dildos and what's safe, what's not, what's the best for them. And my book doesn't touch on that at all. Right? There are plenty of people kind of doing that work, but I think to do that more on a collective level, I think our culture would really benefit from that. And I'm thinking back to Betty Dotson's, body sex groups back in the 70s, in which, she had people huddled into her little Manhattan apartment, and it was essentially a masturbation show and tell, right? And there was a lot of normalizing bodies, normalizing behaviors and moans and the weird faces that we make in ecstasy and all these things that we're not only discovering ourselves, but we're learning from others and the diversity of sexuality and sexual expression and what that can look like in group settings. That's hard to get through just like solo study of the topic online.
Totally. Yeah. Really interesting. Stay tuned, folks, if we're going to be doing something like that in the future. But speaking of cis women, I would love to know a little bit more about female ejaculate, because I feel like this is a topic that is like highly debated. There's like not enough research. People get confused about like squirting versus female ejaculate versus other kinds of vaginal fluids. And I wonder if you can set the record straight.
Sure. Yeah. And that's because I was alluding to earlier of like, same reason why we don't know more about female sexuality in general is the reason why we don't know much about female ejaculation, that female sexual functioning has historically just been viewed as inconsequential. Right. As long as there's an erection and ejaculation of semen, what else is necessary for sex? Right. So it certainly has gotten overlooked. And also the belief that women aren't even concerned about their own sexuality, their own sexual pleasure and satisfaction. So that has just led to dearth of information on basic questions, right? That we should know with confidence of like what's going on and be able to communicate that clearly to people who are asking the questions. And we don't, right? We have like, well, the best that we know is this, right? And female ejaculation is one of those topics where, it has been studied a little bit. When we're looking at expulsion of fluid during sex, we can look at vaginal lubrication that sometimes can come out during orgasmic contractions that's coming from the vagina itself. And then the differentiating between ejaculate and squirting. And some of the articles that I cite in the book that kind of differentiate that was really kind of making the distinction between the fluid's consistency, with ejaculate being thicker and squirting being thinner, and the color, ejaculate being a little bit of an off-white color, like not as clear as squirting fluid is, and the volume of the fluid, with ejaculate being significantly less and squirting being significantly more, both of which are coming from the urethra. And then the debate over, well, is squirting just pee, right? Is it just urine? And some analyses have shown it to be pretty indistinguishable from diluted urine, assuming that the amount, the volume of the fluid has to be coming from the bladder. But with like the ejaculate more believed to be coming from the Skene's gland, which is homologous to the prostate because it actually has PSA in it. So yeah, there's all these different chemical components, and they get and they get a little bit of a mix up too, because at least with ejaculate and squirting, they're coming out of the same ducting, right? They're coming out of the urethra, and so they can pick up chemical components from different parts of the body in that way. So there can be contamination of the fluid during analysis. For me, and what I was trying to argue in the book, like I present all of that and try to differentiate a little bit of what the research has shown. But the bigger issue, to kind of take a step back, is why is this important? Right? And it's important to understand our bodies and know what's up. But I think the questions around female ejaculation stem more from kind of anxiety, embarrassment, insecurity over the question of, am I urinating? Is this urine? Or is this normal? This is gross. This is what dudes do or something. Is this semen, right? Just not. And I think if we look at it, that how is that different than culturally, the cultural message of just being grossed out by anything fluid-wise that's coming out of a woman? And so I think that's part of the larger conversation, is that, do we really need to differentiate it? Will they actually make people feel better about it? Because largely we're grossed out about bodily fluids. And so let's focus on reducing that disgust over natural, normal bodily functions. And so kind of making the argument that even if it is diluted urine that is squirting out, does it feel good? Is it pleasurable? Does it add to your sexuality and sexual experience and satisfaction, whether alone or with a partner? Get a couple more towels, right? We give the freedom to semen to go wherever it wants during sex, and even viewing semen, visually viewing it as an indication that sex has taken place. I feel like all bodily fluids should have that same freedom and so that same level of legitimacy, that if you're seeing the fluid, that, hey, people are having fun here. Right. Sex is having. And then it's just on the personal experience of like, do I actually like this? Because there was one article that came out from Europe that looked at, it was qualitative, so it looked at those experiences of women who do squirt, and some were kind of let down that it wasn't as big of a deal as they heard it would be. Others were a little embarrassed or shamed, or had partners that were kind of grossed out by it. Others felt like it was a feminine superpower, right? And kind of taking it back, that now we can squirt just like the guys have always squirted. And then like, I'm taking ownership of this like fluid space in sex as well. So you're going to have a wide variety of different perceptions of this bodily function, but ultimately it's normal, it's fine, and just focus on, does it feel good? And if so, then there's nothing to worry about. Get a couple more towels, right. Get a couple more loads of laundry. You'll be fine, right? Dump your partner if they're grossed out by it. Totally, it's an issue.
Definitely do that.
Right,
Hands
right.
down.
There's a lot of things that you can do to feel better about it. But just knowing from a health perspective, there's nothing wrong with it.
Totally. And I really like this piece on like, okay, like we have been grossed out about periods. We've been grossed out about other kinds of discharge and fluids, and like the ways in which that vaginas in particular operate. And like, it's time that we just know information about our bodies and other people's bodies and just feel okay with it and normalize it. And that is a really important key there. Amazing. We have a couple more questions. I would love for you to hit us with some masturbation facts that maybe we didn't know before. If you want to throw in some benefits of masturbation, any science behind it, the research, anything you got.
Sure. Well, one thing in terms of like just a benefit that masturbation, specifically a technique called directed masturbation, is an empirically supported treatment for women who cannot have an orgasm. So it's often doctor prescribed, not doing it in session, but there's a step-by-step process of a woman who has difficulty orgasming or has never had an orgasm in their life. It involves ultimately masturbating typically with a vibrator, and it's empirically sound. A lot of sex therapy techniques are very commonly used by sex therapists, but they don't actually have the greatest research behind them to being effective, including the stop-start technique for premature ejaculation. I talk about it a little bit because it's like masturbation technique too. That actually doesn't have the greatest research behind it as being all that successful, but directed masturbation for female orgasmic disorder, very, very effective. So masturbation coming to the rescue for those who cannot have an orgasm. Typically the complaint is not having an orgasm with a partner and then having to learn how to have one by yourself first. Let's see what else. One interesting little thing that I came across was one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence was a physician named Dr. Benjamin Rush. Believed that masturbation could be cause a whole host of different diseases and illnesses. And to prevent the urge to masturbate, he suggested that people should take long journeys on horseback, that they should study mathematics for some reason.
And not fair. If I was studying math, right, I wouldn't want to masturbate.
I did consult with a math professor on campus and they denied this, but so it doesn't work. And not to look a woman directly in the face. So that's Dr. Rush, one of the founding fathers' advice for masturbation. And I guess lastly here, I have in one chapter, kind of talk about foreign body insertions and kind of exploring masturbation beyond just stimulation of the genitals externally. That people love sticking things inside themselves to masturbate. There's a German case study of a guy who would put live maggots into his urethra.
Oh.
Has been doing this he was middle-aged and he's been doing this since he was a kid. Always had no problem of them coming out during orgasm or ejaculation until they didn't. And that's why he's a case study, right? Anytime you end up as a case study, something did not go according to plan.
Oh, no.
So he was fine. Had to be surgically removed, the maggots, because they was doing some damage to his urethra. But he was fine, but they got stuck and probably an embarrassing case. And then I spoke with, because I was starting to talk about this a little bit on Instagram, and I got into a DM conversation with an ER physician. And she said that she removed 20 Happy Meal toys from a man's rectum.
20?
Once. And so 20. Gives a little new meaning to the McDonald's slogan. I'm loving it. So we love putting things in ourselves, all different orifices,
and we won't
urethras,
stop.
vagina, rectum. We're not going to stop.
We're going to keep doing
Not at all. Right. And most of the time we're fine with it. Right. And then I kept trying to reiterate that it wasn't like a cautionary tale or like scare tactics or anything. It was like, most of the time people insert things in themselves. They can do it safely. They can do it healthily. Here's some tips for how to do that. But when you're doing a PubMD or a PubMed search for articles about like masturbation injuries, you see where it's not always safe, it's not always healthy, and where it went really, really wrong for some unfortunate few. And so that was a fun little rabbit hole to go down.
Totally. And for, we get to study those cases, which is really great, and see kind of the anomalies. But what we know as sex educators, as you were kind of talking about before, is that masturbation is really healthy for most people. Like we on Sex Ed with DB talk all the time about how it can help you sleep better or de-stress you or just kind of make you feel like more confident in your body. It could make you feel like you know how to please yourself and therefore tell a partner how to please you. Like there are just so many benefits to masturbation. And actually I recently did a magic wand masturbation experiment. I'll send you the link there, but I just think that ultimately people getting more in tune with themselves and their pleasure, if that's something that they want and they feel fulfilled by, is always a good thing and can really, really add so much to people's lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And I end the book a little bit talking about some of those benefits. I kind of hinted at them throughout the chapters, but at the end, I try to solidify it a little bit more, a little bit of a caution of not overgeneralizing some of the research or misinterpreting the research of like masturbation can cause X, Y, or Z health benefit.
Right.
Because most of it is just kind of correlational research. But there are neurochemical reactions within orgasm that help explain why for some it's best, it's used for sleep or to relax or for pain management, right? There are chemicals involved with orgasm, not just from masturbation, but orgasm in general, that would explain why somebody would have that experience. But results may vary. But what's interesting with that is the research that showed those health benefits and the motivations for people to masturbate, including some of those things like pain relief, stress management, better sleep, things like that. What's often overlooked was the number one reason cited to masturbate, which was just, it feels
people
good.
Want to, because it feels,
exactly.
feels pleasurable.
Yeah. So my caution kind of at the end of the book is that making sure that we're not needing to legitimize masturbation by saying that this is something that's good for you,
Right.
that it needs to be on your to-do list, like eating 6, servings of vegetables a day and making sure you're getting your 10,000 steps or whatever. It's like, no, masturbation is just a momentary behavior. Most of the time it's inconsequential. At best, it feels good.
And you feel joy
what,
or happiness or
right.
whatever kind of
Exactly.
good feeling associated with it. Release, whatever that word is for you.
Yeah, and that's all the validation ways that we need to legitimize it can just end with that, is that it feels good.
Totally.
And it's not going to hurt you.
Yes.
And it's as simple as that.
I'm right there with you. Hey friends, happy Friday. I hope everyone is doing really well. I am fucking stoked to answer this question today. It's one of my absolute faves, which is, am I masturbating too much? I have to say, this is one of the top questions that we get in our Insta DMs. And every time I'm kind of baffled by it. This is one that people ask in the context of, I feel like I'm sinning. Am I masturbating too much? Is my vibrator going to hurt my clit? Am I masturbating too much? I don't have a relationship that I'm in right now, so I feel like I'm masturbating too much. I'm a woman and I've been receiving messages that just everyone take a deep breath, please. Let's do that together. Calm the fuck down. I'm going to tell you the answer right now. The first thing that I want to say is the answer is probably fucking not. But that comes with some caveats, all right? Ask yourself the following questions. Is my masturbation harming myself in any way, physically, emotionally, mentally? Not making me feel guilty, but am I actually putting myself in harm when it comes to my mental health? Am I physically hurting my body? If the answer to those questions are no, ask the next question. Am I hurting someone else that I love? Am I doing this in front of someone and that's impacting their mental health, or am I crossing their boundaries? If the answer is no, ask yourself the next question. Am I foregoing daily responsibilities such as work, school, taking care of bills, taking care of children, doing the shit that I need to do? If the answer is no, if you're not foregoing, AKA you're not doing those responsibilities because of your masturbation habits, go to fucking town, people. There is so much shame, especially when it comes to us learning messages from religious organizations or our family members or the media about us masturbating. And that is messed up that we have so much guilt and so much internalized shame about it. Masturbation gives us so much pleasure and allows us to get in touch with our bodies more, to know what we like for solo sex and for partnered sex. It can help reduce stress. It can help you sleep. It gives you pleasure, which brings you more joy and happiness. There is so much good with masturbation, and I just think it's such a shame. 'Tis a downright shame, if you're on TikTok, that we are so embarrassed by this. And I just implore you, I encourage you to really think deeply. If you're someone who feels shame or guilt around masturbation, where is that coming from? And what can you do to overcome that shame? Whether that be a daily mantra around it of saying masturbation is healthy. I am allowing myself to feel this pleasure and it's more than okay. Maybe it's going to talk therapy or sex therapy to process this shame and to try to figure out what's going on. Maybe you're someone who has experienced some sort of violence, and that is a blockage for you around masturbation or feeling in touch with your body and bringing that pleasure to you. And so, highly recommend that you you really do some deep thinking if you are someone who feels that way. Because again, masturbation is for most people who don't let it overwhelm them when it comes to their daily responsibilities. They're not harming themselves. They're not harming others. If those things aren't true for you, then I want you to feel okay with masturbating. It is a perfectly normal, healthy thing. And while we're on the subject, if you're someone who's wondering, is it weird that I don't like masturbating at all? Is it weird that I hate it and I'm not really into that? No, that's not weird at all either. You are entitled to have the pleasure or not have the pleasure that you want to have. And if you're someone who doesn't want to do that, not because of shame or because of worry or guilt, but just you don't feel like it, you know that that's something you're not interested in, don't let anyone pressure you into feeling like that's strange and you need to. And, there are different points in our lives where we might feel more wanting to masturbate or more interested in that based on other circumstances, based on a sexy book we're reading. There are a lot of things that go into that. And then there are some parts of our lives where we might not feel sexy or like we want to masturbate or touch ourselves or get that pleasure. Folks who are taking SSRIs or antidepressants, at least anecdotally out of the friends that I have shared with me, my libido is like really down overall with partnered sex, with solo sex. And, that could be part of it for you. And so overall, all in all, I just don't want you to feel any worry, just don't judge yourself. Just let yourself do exactly what you want to do and because you want to do it, not because you're getting messages or you're feeling guilt or shame. And if you're someone who does like to masturbate, here's your daily reminder. Go flick that bean, go jerk it. Go have some fun because again, it has so many positive health benefits. It's healthy and it is really fun and brings us a lot of pleasure.
There's an ancient Egypt Heliopolis myth where Atum, the first god, created the world by sucking his own dick and then spitting the semen on the ground, and then the rest of the world came from that. And it makes a lot of sense, like how do you create the world from one person? But having a creation myth that's fundamentally based on masturbation is something that's completely foreign to
I've not heard of that one. That's
It's great. I love it. It's just so, because it makes so much sense. And it also is so revolutionary it's revolutionary for us to look back on, right? That sort of framing of things. And it's interesting to realize how much of this taboo makes no sense at this point in time. A lot of it originates from the desire of different religious groups wanting people to have children, right? There is this idea that every single sperm had a homunculi, like it had a little tiny human in each sperm. So when you ejaculated on your sheets, you were creating mass murder. You were committing mass murder. Right?
Oh my God.
Which neglects the fact that what happens when a woman masturbates, it's not like they're killing all these sperm. But
right.
We're
in the clear, I guess.
Yeah. So a lot of that made me, it's just really reaffirming, it makes you realize that masturbation is part of humanity and our taboo against it is so specific to the neuroses of our time. And it makes you realize that like what you're doing is an ancient act, right? Like when you masturbate, you're doing something that humans have done. Like you could be in a oil painting in the Louvre.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. We recently had on an author named Rachel Feltman, who wrote the book Been There, Done That, A Rousing History of Sex. And if you haven't read it, listener or Vic, I highly recommend you read it. It recently came out and it has a lot of really interesting facts exactly of like what you're talking about. And one of the myths apparently that existed that like there's no proof of this, but speaking of ancient Egypt, that like Cleopatra used
bees,
like a vase of bees like as a vibrator to masturbate with. There is no proof of this, and it is a myth, but it is a very fun myth, and I think it's hilarious that occurred to someone to be like, oh yeah, no, she just like put a shit ton of bees in a vase and shook it and then just like, masturbated with them. It's like, oh, okay. Right.
Okay. My favorite part of that myth is imagining the person who has to go catch all those bees. Because
that's what Rachel talks about in the book. She's like, how the fuck did this happen? Like what are the logistics? Are there new bees every time she like is horny?
Or like there must be. You can't just like throw some flowers in the vase. They're gonna die. Right? Yeah,
absolutely.
So there's like some poor sod who had to like go catch bees every day for her.
They're like, fuck. Actually, I just saw Jackass Forever.
Okay, I have not seen
the most recent. Yeah, I don't know. We rented it even. Okay. It was like $5 on Amazon Prime. So my partner and I were like, let's fucking do this. We've seen all these Jackass movies. And spoiler alert, if you want to see the movie and not have Jackass be spoiled, Steve-O puts a fuck ton of bees on his dick. Oh my God. It is terrible to watch. So in case you watch that movie, just be prepared that there are a lot of bees on Steve-O's dick at some point in the movie.
I don't think he did it right. I think that he was
incorrect.
To aim for Cleopatra and he forgot the vase.
He really forgot the vase. It definitely didn't feel good when stingers were going into his wiener for sure. Tell me, speaking of myths, like Cleopatra, what are some masturbation myths that you like want to dispel for people that you feel like, are important to talk about?
Okay, so there's all the normal stuff, right? That you can't masturbate on your period, that's unhygienic, and that's bullshit. We can say that is bullshit. It does not affect your sperm count. It doesn't affect your fertility rates. It doesn't affect your ability to have sex later on. And there's all that stuff. And I encourage all the classics. And I encourage people to like go and look that stuff up. But honestly, the thing that I just want to hammer home to everyone is you are normal if you don't masturbate. You are normal if you do masturbate. You're normal if you masturbate a lot. You're normal if you don't masturbate often. I think that there's such a pressure to figure out what's normal, right? And everyone's different and you're fine how you are.
Yes. Yeah. And I think this is a perfect moment to talk about asexuality and the spectrum of asexuality, because I think, and myself included, we had a person who is asexual on the podcast a couple of seasons ago. Or was that last season? What is time? I have no idea. And his name is Danielle Walker, and he has a YouTube channel called Slice of Ace. And he really informed me that like asexuality is a spectrum. And like for him and his partner at the time, or I don't know if they're still together, but like he would kind of say like, yeah, like maybe I am into sex, like if my partner wants it, but like independent of my partner, I don't really want it. And like, I'm still asexual. And that really was like a mind blowing moment for me of like, oh, if you're out there, listener, and you feel like I'm like not really into this, like nothing about this, or only a few things about this, or one thing about this is interesting to me. And like, that if you identify and are asexual, like, and you do like masturbation once in a while, but not really, or, however you are, and if you identify as asexual, like that's great. And like, you shouldn't feel pressure to conform to other people. Something off the back of that though, that I'm curious to get your take on. Question first. Are you around a lot of youths, like a lot of middle school students?
No, not really.
Okay. I teach sex ed in the classroom like occasionally, and, have been around different groups of middle schoolers and high schoolers at different points in time. And a lot of young people follow me on TikTok. You could just tell that they're like 13, 14, 15 years old, even though in my profile it does say 18 plus. Protection. Got to protect myself. And pretty much on their profile, like
a lot of them will be like asexual, ace, ace, ace. And it's interesting to me because I think that young people are having a ball with identity labels right now and like are very excited about it. And it's part of their experimentation. And some of those identity labels will stick and some of them won't. And I wonder your opinion on like how to engage in that conversation with young people around asexuality, of teaching them, yeah, you might be asexual and you might just not have gone through puberty yet and just might not be interested. And I think it's a really tricky balance when it comes to engaging in that conversation with young people. Do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I hear that. I think that this is honestly a tricky conversation with adults too, right?
Yeah.
Because it's this idea of respecting the validity of who they are in that moment, right?
And the process, if it's a process.
And also kind of expressing that you can change. I think the key is finding the balance between respecting what they're saying about how they are versus respecting who they are. Does that make sense? Like, I think, okay, let's
say
see
more.
I think that you can, I think there's a lot of pressure right now to completely always understand how your sex identifies you as a person. And I am really happy. Like, I honestly think that I'm so excited to see how these generations turn out because they have so much more vocabulary to talk about what's going on with them. And I think that there's a lot more tools available to them to explore and explain what is going on with them in a very emotionally intelligent and introspective way. So that's awesome. I think they're also still going to change as they grow up, right? And I change. I'm still changing. And I think that figuring out a way to be like, I hear what you're saying. I think that it's awesome that you are sure of yourself in this way. I think there's a chance that you'll change. And that is also fine. Like, who you are is true to who you are right now. That might change and you'll still be who you are. Does that make sense?
Yeah. That's a good line. I think the young people that I've encountered in the past have, you know, some of the more outspoken ones have been like, well, I'm asexual, so I don't need sex ed because I like don't need the information. I won't like engage in that at all. And I think it's that there's the turning point of being like, yeah, maybe you don't, but maybe one day you'll change. And also maybe you'll have friends who need this information. So I'm going to need you to stay in class. Like kind of.
Just because you don't have like, for example, we learn about biology. You're not a fish, you know, it's still useful.
Sure. Yeah, of course. Yeah. You know, as a teacher, you're like, no, you're staying in class. Like you're trying to figure out, because, you know, part of it also is that they're uncomfortable with, you know, the conversation around masturbation. They're uncomfortable around the conversation around sex. And it's understandable. Like middle schoolers, like sex is funny. When I work with middle schoolers, that's usually the first thing I say is like, hey, sex is funny. And like, it's okay to laugh. And like, it's a little silly and awkward. And like, you're going to need this information, like whether that's about healthy relationships or sex or consent or birth control or STI prevention or drug and alcohol, you know, like experimentation. Like there's so much that goes under sex ed. So I think like bringing it all together and saying, maybe you don't need this right now, but there are topics we'll go through that will be relevant to you.
Right. Can I ask, like, what is the range of, I'm curious to hear like the most difficult, quote unquote, students you have and perhaps the like most rewarding students. They might be the same.
Oh, no, I don't think they're the same. I think the most rewarding, for example, like I'm teaching 11th and 12th graders and I have my last lesson with them tomorrow. It was so short. I only had like 2 classes with each of them so far. And this is our third and final one together. So it's like barely any time. So it's hard to build rapport and build trust in that amount of time, especially when it's the end of the year, yada, yada. Like there's so much to it. But like I went over, you know, this idea with my students of like, hey, if you are trying to get tested for STIs and you don't want your parents to know, then this is the information you have to know. Like if you need to go to a clinic and you need to use your health insurance, call your health insurance and see if they're going to mail you a bill at home or if they can just send it to you personally by email. Pay out of pocket if you don't want to use your insurance. Like there are sliding scales here where you can get info in the clinics, like that information. I think that students respect when teachers say like, hey, it's like none of your parents' business. Like your reproductive health, if you don't feel comfortable in front of your parents, you have a right to get birth control, get condoms, get STI tested without the need for your parents to know. And one of the students came up to me, and I have an anonymous question box in every lesson so that students can, and sometimes do, write questions and I can answer them like in the following class or in a Google Doc so they can just visit it. But instead of writing a question, a student came up to me after class and was like, hey, can I just ask you a question now? Like I got tested for STIs the other day. Like I don't really want my parents to know. Will they know if X, Y, and Z? And I was so touched that like after 2 lessons with this person, that they were comfortable enough to come up to me and have a private conversation with me. And I was able to give them a little bit more information about that. Like that is the most rewarding piece of like a recognition that they're listening and they trust me enough to ask me further questions. It's like the dream that like a sex educator has. In terms of the more difficult ones, it's a combination, I think, of like behavioral issues that are just generally difficult in class. Like if a student is being disruptive or, if you're talking about anatomy and a student cannot stop laughing or keeps calling out when you're talking about the penis. And like, hopefully you have another teacher in the room who knows the students better. If I'm a sex educator coming in for a couple drop-in lessons, who can take that student outside, maybe talk to them about calming down, coming back in. So there's just like general behavioral issue stuff, but some students also like really challenge and have like harmful ideas about like the gender binary or, X, Y, and Z, where like I have to keep, or abortion, where I have to keep my cool and not be inappropriate and say like, no, you're wrong, like, or whatever, because you have to remain as like unbiased as possible. And so, if a student is like, well, I think abortion is killing a baby, like all I can really say is like, everyone has the right to their opinion. And although you can have that right to your own opinion, that opinion should not impact other people's decisions about their bodies. And the reality of the situation is a fetus is not a baby. And that's a fact. And just, whatever you can, however you can be factual, it's hard to always keep your cool. But I would say those are the more like challenging moments that I always am like figuring out how to go about that.
Yeah, being a teacher in those very emotionally charged situations is really hard. You have to like figure out ways to kind of like depersonalize yourself and figure out how to like shape yourself around their needs, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Wow, Vic, this has been so wonderful. We have a couple more questions.
Sorry, I keep like,
no,
I just want to hear more.
I haven't really talked about my sex ed work on the podcast. So this is a very fun moment for me to do that. So thanks for asking. But I want to know, like, if you want the listeners to walk away with like one main takeaway when it comes to masturbation, what would that be?
I say this in the conclusion of the book, but I heard this quote a while back and I can't figure out where it is. I've tried to figure out where it's from. But at the end of the day, I can't tell if sex is the most important thing in the world or the least important thing in the world. And I feel like that's been true ever since I heard that quote. And that's probably related to what I want people to walk away with. Like, it isn't important at all. Like, but it is. It's also a lot of who you are as a person, but it's also totally not. It's your genitals are like your big toe. They're important to you. They're a part of you, but also they're just another part of your body.
I haven't really even, thought about it in that way before. That's pretty deep. Thank you so much for joining for this amazing best of episode. And don't forget that you can listen to the full episodes linked in the show notes for more. And just a quick reminder, I know you maybe heard about this in the beginning in our our little ad for the Valentine's retreat, but I just want to really plug it again because I would love to see y'all there. I'm doing a retreat for Valentine's Day in Palm Springs, Valentine's weekend, and I just can't wait to do this. It's for single women and femmes. We only have room for 12. There are limited spots, and I just really hope that I get to know some of you at this retreat. It's 3 nights, 4 days in a beautiful Palm Springs villa, yoga, workshops, food and meals by a private chef, cocktails and mocktails and a pool and pickleball and just all these fun things. And I'm so excited to see you there. Also, do you have any other questions about masturbation that maybe weren't answered here? I would love to know, especially as we plan our next season all about pleasure. Send me an email at sexedwithdb@gmail.com and your question might just become an episode. And don't worry, we will keep it all anonymous. I will see you next week with our first episode of season 13, Lucky 13, for more pleasure-focused content. Love y'all.